Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of Spectator Sports. This is Sebastian Fonseca. We are breaking down a ton of action across opening weekend of the NBA playoffs. And before we get into it though, please do me a favor, like this video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Take a look at our Instagram and TikTok pages, and also for my listeners on Spotify, if you could give this a 5-star review, it helps us a massive amount on those platforms. So all links are in the description, and take a look at that when you get a chance. Some of Saturday's games were one-sided affairs, like the Celtics with the Atlanta Hawks and then the Sixers taking on the Brooklyn Nets. Both games, like I said, were routes, but we'll get into that action a little bit later. But I wanted to talk about the Knicks and Cavs. That was probably the first close matchup we got to see so far in these NBA playoffs. The Knicks came in as the 5th seed. They're going on the road to Cleveland to take on the upstarted Cleveland Cavaliers. I was really impressed by the Knicks. They played as well as they possibly could on the road. High stakes affair, and I mean, basically this whole thing is led by Jalen Brunson. I mean, he was a guy I thought was snubbed off of the All-Star team in February. Should have made that team somehow, some way. But still, he had a phenomenal season, and he led the way for this Knicks team. Julius Randle came into this game hobbled, and he was battling this ankle injury, so he wasn't at 100%, so it had to go back to Jalen Brunson. And he's not a big guy. Remember, he's about 6 feet, 6'1", and you're playing with a bunch of 7-footers. The Cavs are a long, big team. They have Jared Allen, they have Evan Mobley in the middle, so that's gonna clog up the paint pretty well. Darius Garland is kind of a longer point guard, and then Donovan Mitchell is at least a bigger shooting guard. So those are guys that just are bigger and taller that can bother a guy like Jalen Brunson. He has the ability to make the defense dance however way he wants it because of his handling ability. I mean, he has the ability to probe the defense. He can step back, stop on a dime, on a pull-up, whatever the case may be, he's been able to do it. And he's changed life night and day for the New York Knicks. They didn't get a lot of key contributions that I thought in my preview series about the younger guys like Obi Toppin or Emmanuel Quickley or even Quentin Grimes, but Grimes in particular, he at least had the closing free throws to seal the game. Clutch stuff from him. Julius Randle didn't have a particularly efficient game, but still made his impact known when needed. Just provided enough for the Knicks to get away with a road victory. Now they have home court advantage for the rest of the series, at least up until when they switch sides over in New York for games 3 and 4. For the Cavs, it was a little bit disappointing. We saw Donovan Mitchell do his thing, clearly a superstar, the leader of this team, and didn't get a ton of contributions from other guys. Yes, it was their first true playoff game in this reinstalled Cleveland Cavaliers team, but I expected a little bit more from their role players, and we didn't get that, especially when they're playing at home. Role players are accustomed to playing behind their home crowd, using that energy from the crowd. It was a raucous affair in Cleveland for sure, and still wasn't enough for those role players to really step up. I think the Cavs had to make some adjustments. Obviously, they have to find a way to prevent Cedi Osman from guarding Jalen Brunson, at least on a regular basis, because he was put on skates for most of this game. So adjustments there definitely can be made by their head coach, but I do see them winning game 2 and taking the series 1 apiece back to New York. In the early part of Saturday, I talked about how the Celtics and Sixers in particular, who were both Eastern Conference title favorites for sure, they handled their business quite comfortably. The Celtics were up by as many as 30 points on the Atlanta Hawks, and then later we saw the Sixers beat the Brooklyn Nets by 20 points. To start with the Celtics, I mean, it's really the great defense that they played on Trae Young. In the regular season, when they were playing them 3 times, they let Trae Young do his thing. He averaged north of 30 points and was pretty efficient, but then they honed in on his teammates and prevented them from going off and committing key contributions for the Hawks. They won the season series 3-0, and they took a different approach in the postseason. Joe Mazzulla threw a ton of bodies at Trae Young. We saw Derek White, Marcus Smart, and even Jaylen Brown throwing at Trae Young, and those are bigger bodies, longer bodies. Those are guys that can affect his play and also his vision as well, because he forced a lot of turnovers. He was very inefficient. I mean, he shot just 5 out of 18. And overall, I mean, the Hawks as a team shot very poorly from deep. And when you're giving up as many threes as they did to the Celtics in game 1, you're going to lose by a ton of points. I think that the Hawks are going to be in over their head. It's a really bad matchup. The problem is that they just don't have the wings to really contend with the Celtics. And even Tatum didn't have the best of games in game one, but still was able to provide enough. So they've been very well balanced. I mean, Derek White in particular had a great offensive game, very well known for his defense, but played very well for Joe Mazzulla. So the Celtics in particular, they're well balanced. And I think especially with Robert Williams back into the fold, patrolling the paint, playing some good minutes off the bench in limited roles, as long as he stays healthy, that's just another piece for the Celtics to remain in contention. For the Sixers, they got to a spectacular start for this postseason. I talked about how there's a lot of matchups that favor this Sixers team versus the Brooklyn Nets. They went right to work. I mean, Joel Embiid didn't have a big night by his standards, but still did very good work against Nick Claxton. Claxton did get 3 blocks in the game, but again, that's really a credit due to his length rather than just his size and bulk, and that's a big mismatch on the inside that I talked about previously. Mikal Bridges did his thing, a valiant effort in 30 points, but his team lost by 20 points. And that's mainly due to the outside shooting by the Sixers. James Harden in particular had 5 triples to start off the game in the first half. I mean, Tyrese Maxey's been phenomenal in this season, and same thing translated to game 1. So if they're doing their thing from the outside, it's going to be very hard and could be a very short series for the Brooklyn Nets. Let's talk about the most intriguing matchup on Saturday. That is the Kings playing the Warriors. The Kings are making their first postseason appearance in 17 years, hosting Game 1, and this is the opening round series against the defending champs in the Golden State Warriors. I thought coming into this series that the Golden State Warriors have that veteran advantage, and they'll find a way to pick and choose their spots, and this was where the Sacramento Kings' great season unfortunately may come to an end. But some early takeaways from game 1 is that this could be a long series. The Kings woke up and they're here, and they provided a great performance all around from the team on game 1 on Saturday night. We talked about how De'Aaron Fox has been phenomenal this season. He's been an all-star first time ever, and he did a great job in his playoff debut. I mean, 38 points. And I mean, he was so good in terms of utilizing his speed. He can just stop and pop and take the pull-up jump shot, or he can dribble drive, whatever the case may be. He was just spectacular, the best player on the court, I thought, on Saturday night. And he did get some great help from his Kentucky backcourt teammate in Malik Monk. He came up with 30 points off the bench. And I mean, if you're getting that kind of scoring output from 2 guards, it's going to be a great night, because they needed it, because Domantas Sabonis could not buy a basket. From the start of the second quarter onwards, he looked soft. I mean, he is a 7-footer, and he's going up against guys like Kevon Looney and Draymond Green. Those are smaller defenders. He has a great deal of length over them, but they're much stronger. We saw them get into the chest of Domantas Sabonis, and he had to settle for a lot of these floating hook shots. They just bounced every which way off the rim, even clanked some off the backboard, but still it just wasn't looking like a good night for him. He even missed a couple free throws, and he's a very reliable free throw shooter in my opinion. That was disappointing from him, but he still was able to impact the game in other ways other than scoring. He is a great rebounder, and he came up with 16 rebounds in this game, and that was a huge reason why the Kings were able to win this game. You know that you have to out-rebound the Warriors. They're a smaller team, and they have to get out on the break. Anytime you can out-rebound them, especially on getting extra possessions and offensive rebounds, you got to take advantage of that, and that's what the Kings did. Great performance also from their backup big when Domantas Sabonis was struggling. Alex Len, who is a former Terp, I have to give a shout out there because he was pretty good at his days in UMD. I remember him playing there, and he's had a tough start to his career, and now he was on the edge of the rotation, got some key minutes towards the end of the season, and earned a spot as the backup big for the Sacramento Kings. Provided a great deal of energy. I mean, not gaudy stats, 4 points, 7 rebounds, a block. The energy, the presence that was there was great. He had 2 rolling dunks coming off of great cuts to the rim, patrolled the glass pretty well, had a key block on Draymond Green that really set the tone early in that second quarter. Despite getting out to that second quarter lead, the Kings were able to remain within arm's distance. They even trailed as much as 10 points, but slowly but surely they chipped away, and that was mainly thanks to a great third quarter by De'Aaron Fox. again, I mean, he's doing this while chasing Stephen Curry. I mean, the backcourt of Klay Thompson and Stephen Curry had another phenomenal performance between the two. We know the Splash Brothers really take it up another notch in the postseason, but this time you saw mostly a lot of great shot making. The Kings made them earn it. They played really good defense for the most part. Steph had a lot of tough looks at the basket. He had to alter the shots or just change his hand at the last minute. He still got him to go, and that's credit to Steph. But also Klay, I mean, he's making those fall away, fading three-pointers that he's known to do off of those pin down screens. Very tough for him and very tough to guard. And going back to De'Aaron, he's guarding Stephen Curry, so he's exhausted. He talked about how it's just so tiring when you're chasing him, fighting through screens just to take all those hits and just being able to have the energy on the offensive end to have the burst that he relies on in his offensive game. But this is the great thing about basketball. You get to see a chess match between two great head coaches. Mike Brown is more than just a protege of Steve Kerr. He did coach the Cleveland Cavaliers when he had LeBron James at his disposal, and he had a couple shorter stints, yes, but he's a very competent head coach. He just needed to be having the right players and the right system to get his philosophy out there. He did learn some Golden State tricks, and he's brought it over to Sacramento, but he's definitely earned the whole head coach of the year award that he will be getting later this year. And he showed that. I mean, he made some adjustments, probably left Sabonis on the bench a lot longer than many people expect, but he went with a hot hand in Alex Len, and I thought that was great adjustments in game. So we'll see what Steve Kerr can do for game 2, and if Golden State wants to win this series, they're going to have to steal a game quick in game 2 to make this a series, because going down 0-2, defending home court is doable for Golden State, but that puts a ton of pressure on the defending champs. For Sunday's game, we started off with the Grizzlies hosting the LA Lakers, and I thought about this matchup once we got the schedule lined up after the Lakers beat the Minnesota Timberwolves in that play-in game. I thought this was a really good matchup for the Lakers. They have the length and the size that can bother the Grizzlies. The problem is, for Memphis, we know, is that they're missing Steven Adams and Brandon Clark. The Lakers pose a lot of matchup problems, particularly with Anthony Davis. Now, he gave me a big scare and made me very frustrated because he got hurt towards the end of the first half, and he seemed to be saying that he couldn't move or feel his arm. I thought, that's great. He tore his bicep. He's out for the rest of the whole season. And still, it was just only a stinger, so I could bring down my blood pressure. I could relax a little bit. He had a pretty good second half. Didn't do a ton in scoring this game, but he made his impact on the glass and had a nice set of 5 blocks in this game, a postseason career high for him. LeBron did his thing, also very aggressive too. He also had 3 blocks in this game, and we haven't really seen LeBron be so good on the defensive end ever since he's been probably with the Lakers. He does it in spurts, yes, but he has to conserve a lot of energy, as we know, for the offensive end. But in the postseason, he just brings it on to a whole nother level. And the great thing about this game is that they got key contributions from other guys not named AD and LeBron James. And those guys were mostly Rory Hachimura and Austin Reeves. To start with Rory, I've known him since he actually got drafted in his days with the Washington Wizards. I was at the draft party. I'm a Wizards season ticket holder, so I get to see a ton of Wizards games. So I saw him develop when he was really young, coming out of Gonzaga. Definitely wasn't used the best, and then he fell out of favor, and they decided to go with Denny Avdija out of Israel. So he kind of took Rory's minutes, and they traded him over to LA. And even in LA, he started off pretty well, but then he fell out of the rotation slowly but surely in March. But still found a way to stay on the edges of the rotation. He had a phenomenal game. I mean, 29 points, 5 triples, a lot of nice cuts to the basket resulting in dunks. I mean, he was attacking the rim with ferocity, and if that's the Rory we're going to get for this postseason, I'm so here for it. He's a great forward that can be another asset for this Lakers team. Ever since being inserted into the starting lineup alongside D'Angelo Russell as the shooting guard, he's been really good. I mean, he's been very effective in terms of getting tough looks in mid-range and also being a reliable shooter from the outside. He had an I'm him moment, and I really love that for him. He was doubted a lot early on in his career, but he made a name for himself the last 2 seasons in particular, so we'll see what happens the rest of this postseason, but great start for him so far. And if this is the Lakers, that they're going to get some key contributions from guys not named LeBron, not named AD, they were going to be very dangerous. For the Grizzlies, it was a good game for them to start. The first quarter, they got off to a slow start, but they responded, even taking a lead into halftime, mainly thanks to Jaren Jackson Jr. Jackson is probably going to lock up the Defensive Player of the Year award, but he's taken numerous strides in his offensive game. This game in particular, he was probably the best Grizzly on the court. He had 31 points, did his thing on the defensive glass, had a couple blocks, and also knocked down a couple triples. And that's what he can do. He's just so rangy as a forward that can guard positions 1 to 5. And if he just got a little bit of help, and now, of course, biggest thing out of this was Ja Morant. He was solid, but then he got hurt in the fourth quarter. He landed awkwardly on his shooting hand, and regardless, he could be missing some time. And his status for game 2 is very much in doubt right now. If Ja is out, I think that's basically it for the Grizzlies. But if he can return even by game 3, it's still very much a series. But the Lakers have to maintain that advantage and take advantage of just him being out of the lineup for game 2 and taking potentially a 2-0 lead back to LA. Now, with the Heat stealing game 1 behind a great performance by playoff Jimmy Butler, I mean, he had a great game overall, led the charge, and now the Heat steal home court advantage early on in the series. And that's what we saw on Sunday. A lot of teams stealing home court advantage. The road teams were having favorable records heading into game 2s, but I was really excited to see that we're going to get possibly a longer drawn-out series in this 1A matchup, but it's going to be something to keep an eye out for because Giannis' health is going to be a big factor for the remainder of the series. A lot of people thought the Clippers and the Suns is going to be a short matchup because Kevin Durant and the Suns have been undefeated as long as he plays from start to finish, and yeah, he played in this game, but the Suns lost, and I thought this is probably why, because the Clippers are a deeper team. They have a lot more bodies to throw versus the top-heavy Suns. They got off to a really strong start. I mean, they led for double digits for most of the first half. The Suns cut it to 5, even taking the lead in the third quarter. And it was a back-and-forth affair from there. But thanks to a dominant performance by Kawhi Leonard, I mean, 38, 5, and 5. And this is his first postseason game in over 2 years, and it's great to see that he's responding well after that ACL injury back in 2021. And now that he has a season under his belt, he seems to be getting healthy, being available for this Clippers team, and he's led the charge. Without his performance today, the Clippers would have been toast. But that's not to say that he was alone in this performance either, because Eric Gordon had a really nice game as well. And while Russell Westbrook didn't have a great day shooting, he was great on the defensive end. I mean, a key block on Devin Booker when they were leading by 3 points, getting the deflection off of Booker to seal possession back in the Clippers' favor. Just a really smart heads-up play from him, and he was amped up. You saw that he guarded Kevin Durant on a few occasions. He even forced some turnovers in that first half. Has that energy that just is kind of hit or miss. That energy can be like the Tasmanian devil. It's sometimes great when it works out in your favor and he's making smart plays, but also it can be out of control. And we got to see that in this game. I mean, yes, his shooting was terrible, 3 out of 19. But his impact in other ways is just something that you do get out of Russell Westbrook. And that's something that we didn't see when he was with the Lakers. No matter what he did, it just didn't work. And that probably just goes back to just him being a poor fit with the Lakers. With the Clippers, they know what to do with him and his skill set. Credit to them. Credit to Ty Lue for maximizing his skills, because now we're going to get a longer drawn-out series. With the Suns, you just don't know what you're going to get out of this team. Yes, KD is there. He was a rebound away from having a triple-double. I liked what I saw, but there were times he just didn't have assertiveness in this game, and that's what you need out of your best player. Book did his thing. He was assertive. He scored very efficiently, probably the best player for most of the game, and while Kevin Durant did it in spurts. But they also need a little bit more from DeAndre Ayton and Chris Paul. Those two guys in particular were just too quiet, because the Suns really need that after that poor performance in Game 7 in the conference semifinals last year against Luka's Mavs. This is now their second loss in a row at home in the postseason, so they're going to have to turn some things around, because right now they don't have home court advantage. Game 2 is a must-win before the series shifts over to LA. I mean, the series, if it goes out longer, you could also see Paul George maybe come back for a Game 6 or 7. Right now, it seems that Paul's going to miss this series entirely, and they'll hope that he's back for the second round series if they were to advance. But for right now, this is what you're going to get out of the Clippers, and still they have a ton of depth as well. A lot of people favored the Suns to make this a short series, but I'm going to stick with my prediction and say that this series is going to be 6 or 7 games. The Pelicans were eliminated by the 10-seeded OKC Thunder on their home floor, and after the game, we heard some really interesting quotes from their veteran guard, CJ McCollum. He vented his frustrations because he played the last few games with a torn labrum and how other guys haven't been available, and that's just so vital to making runs into the postseason. Zion has been the opposite of available. He's been dinged up for the majority of his career, and CJ has been very frustrated by that. Now, he didn't name Zion by name, but in his quote, which I'll leave up here because I don't want to misquote him, but he did in summary talk about how people need to be on the right diet plans, and that's just so key. This all goes back to Zion, his weight, how he looks, because that is a huge factor why he hasn't been available in his NBA career. Ever since joining the league in 2019, he's been eligible to play 328 regular season games, only playing in 114. That's less than 35%. And these injuries have piled up. In his rookie year, it was the knee with the meniscus. In his third season, he missed the entire year to a foot injury. Now it's the hamstring. And with him there, the Pelicans make some noise, because in this year in particular, they were on the cusp of being a top 3 seed in the West. And ever since his injury in mid-January, it's been a downward spiral for the Pelicans as they now are eliminated from the postseason entirely. Just been disappointing. I mean, it's been a frustrating time in New Orleans because they've had an injury history before with Chris Paul and then Anthony Davis both being traded out of New Orleans. Now, they did commit the max contract to Zion, and now they're on the hook to pay a hefty salary for the next 3-4 seasons. And right now, they're not getting a lot of return on investment because he's just not been available. So definitely something to keep an eye out for, because they can't even trade out of this contract. It's just not lucrative to any other team. Zion is a great talent, yes, but like I always said, availability is the best ability. The title race in the English Premier League is really heating up. I talked last week about how Arsenal dropped points against Liverpool, blowing a 2-0 lead, and now this week they did the same thing against West Ham. And now with them dropping points in consecutive matches, this opens the door even wider for Manchester City. The good thing is for Arsenal, maybe it's an interesting point for sure, is that City is juggling for the treble right now. They're still alive in the FA Cup, and they're also still alive for the Champions League title. So them playing extra competitions, whether it's midweek or just in the weekends as well in the FA Cup, it's going to add some extra miles, extra travel time, extra tweaking of the lineups, and also potentially subject City to injuries as well. Now, you don't wish injuries to anybody, of course, but it's part of the game. And Pep is going to have to be careful in this. Now, he has to know that the Premier League title is important and Champions League is also important. Now, they're up 3-0 right now to Bayern, and it would take probably a miracle for them to blow that lead. We have seen them blow leads. We've seen crazy things happen in the Champions League. So let's say that they advance right there. So I think they'll rest some players for sure, and they'll look to their FA Cup semi-final matchup against Sheffield United. Probably lock that up to advance to the FA Cup final. That will set up a nice matchup against Arsenal on the 26th of April. For Arsenal, Arteta only has to worry about the Premier League. They're knocked out of any other competition, so the only focus will be on Premier League fixtures. Now, you have a few matches against teams that are fighting to stay in the Premier League, and then you also have Newcastle United, who's fighting to remain for a Champions League spot for next year. Yeah, they have some tricky fixtures coming up, namely against Manchester City. But the thing is, like I talked about before, the fact that they don't have to juggle as many competitions that Pep Guardiola has to do for Man City, I think this slightly favors Arsenal for this title race. I think all they have to do in this matchup on the 26th is at least get a positive result. So a draw, a win would be phenomenal, but let's just say if they get a draw, they handle business against these teams that are fighting to remain in the Premier League. Let's say they beat Chelsea too. I think other than that, maybe even a draw against Newcastle United, that's still going to be enough to hold on to that Premier League title, but it's definitely going to be a tight race. So let's buckle up for the last 8 or so games of the Premier League, because it's going to be very exciting. So that's it for this episode of Spectator Sports. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, drop a like on this video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Take a look at our Instagram and TikTok pages, and for my Spotify listeners, give this a 5-star rating if you haven't done so already. All links are in the description, and until next time, take care and be safe.